Hello, everyone. Good morning. Happy Sunshine Week. My name is Sam Englot. I'm the Deputy Director at Progress Michigan. I appreciate everyone being here with us this morning as we announce policy language behind a FOIA ballot initiative for November 2022. This call is being recorded and can be made available to any members of the media who requested after the call. We will have a short statement from our Executive Director, Lonnie Scott. We are also joined by Progress Michigan Legal Counsel Mark Brewer. We'll be happy to take any questions from you all. Just a little bit of housekeeping. When we do come to the Q&A portion, I would just ask that members of the media raise their hand, and that'll just signal to me that you've got a question, and just please state your name and your outlet prior to asking your question. And with that, I think I'll turn it over to Lonnie Scott, Executive Director of Progress Michigan.
Thanks, Sam. And thanks, everybody, for joining us. As Sam said, my name's Lonnie Scott, and I'm the Executive Director of Progress Michigan. Even though there's a little bit of a cold snap out there today, it is Sunshine Week here in Michigan, and we thought there would be no better way to celebrate that than to unveil the specifics of a policy proposal that will bring more transparency to our state government. And what we're announcing today is the policy that will simply open up the governor's office and the legislature to the Freedom of Information Act. For too long, Michigan's transparency rankings nationally have been at the bottom of the barrel, and we hope that this effort will help us rise to the top. Michigan is one of two states where the governor's office and state legislature are exempt from FOIA. And our proposal will change that. We also know that one of the problems with FOIA is the exorbitant wait times that sometimes we have to wait to get information back, even after an entity has told you that that information exists and you have paid any fees that they're charging. At Progress Michigan once, we had to wait over 9 months to receive documents from the Department of Corrections. This proposal will require that all documents related to FOIA requests be given within 60 days of the granting period. This proposal is a vast improvement over the LoRa bills that have been proposed in the legislature, which basically are what you would get if you ordered FOIA reform from wish.com. The LoRa applies a different standard of transparency to the legislature than any other level or branch of government, and blocks the courts as an avenue for people when their requests are denied. LoRa also contains a troubling 14-day window where documents can be destroyed. Our proposal, and any serious transparency proposal, has no such document destruction policy. Michiganders deserve real transparency at every level of government, not half measures, no more loopholes, and definitely not the LoRa bills that the legislature is pushing forward right now. Today is just the beginning of this effort. We'll have updates for you and for the public as we go along. If people are interested in getting involved in this effort, they should go to closelensingloopholes.com and sign up for the email and text list there. We did a recent survey through public policy polling. We put those out every month as a part of our lake effect research efforts. And that poll showed that 74% of Michiganders support changes to FOIA to open the governor and the legislature up to the transparency requirements that every other level of government are subject to. So we think there will be no problem getting this on the ballot, and certainly no problem getting it passed in November of 2022. I've had some questions from many of you that are on this call since a few weeks ago when we announced that we would be undertaking this effort. There's been questions about the timeline. So let me address a couple of those here. We fully intend to take this proposal to the ballot. We have filed a lawsuit, and Mark can answer questions about that potentially if there are any, against what we believe are unconstitutional signature gathering rules. And while that suit is pending, we will move this petition through the process so that we're ready to collect signatures once those signature collection rules are solidified and we know exactly what we will need to get this on the ballot. We will be pairing this effort with our previously announced lobby reform proposal, and we expect voters to have a chance to weigh in on both in 2022. The lobby reform proposal that we have has already been cleared by the Board of Canvassers. We have petitions printed. We had actually started signature collection on March 6th of last year, and then things were shut down due to COVID. So we are ready to go with that proposal as well as soon as we have clarity about the signature gathering rules. So we have no plan, no formal date to announce to you today as to when we will start collecting signatures, but we do plan to use the most of this year as a time to educate and get support from the public and to bring partners on board for both of these efforts. With that, I think we're ready to open up for questions. And I know there are a lot of other specifics that folks probably are interested in. We do have an FAQ sheet as well. And we can run through some of those specific changes and certainly questions for Mark if you have them as well.
Thanks, Lonnie. And I would just point out to folks that if you are interested in finding the actual language of the proposal, you can go to closelensingloopholes.com, navigate over to the FOIA section of that website, and there should be a button at the bottom that allows you to read the proposed changes that we've outlined. So I see a few hands up here. I'm just going to go in the order that I see them, and we will start with Jonathan Osting from Bridge.
Yeah, thanks, Al. This might be a question for Mark, but folks who are pushing this LoRa proposal in Lansing say part of their concern is that courts might not enforce FOIA on the legislature because of separation of powers concerns. I know in Indiana, the Supreme Court declined to force disclosure in a case involving alleged corruption of a public official. Is that a concern here? And do you think your proposal could run into challenges on that front?
Jonathan, this is Mark Brewer. We don't think that is a concern. If you look at the next to last new section in the proposal, 15.247, there's a specific waiver of all sovereign, governmental, executive, and legislative immunities and privileges. That is intended to deal with that problem. You'll contrast that with the LoRa bills, which preserve legislative privileges and immunities. And so again, that's just another way in which the LoRa bill is really a false advertising of openness, because anybody who tried to enforce it in court would run into that problem. But here we have the strongest possible statement that the courts should enforce this, and legislative immunities and privileges should not stand in the way.
What about executive privileges in your proposal?
That section also covers executive privileges. It waives, and I'm going to quote here, quote, all sovereign, governmental, executive, and legislative immunities and privileges.
And can you just explain to me what privileges, what that means and how that might shield disclosure if either the legislature or executive office are able to claim privilege?
Well, for the legislature, and again, this is very specific in the LoRa bill, they would claim that the privileges and immunities under Article 4, Section 11 would apply to any attempt to enforce FOIA against them. So there's that. Executive privilege in Michigan, I will tell you, is there's an attorney general's opinion on it, but apart from that, it's very undefined in terms of what executive privilege means in Michigan. And any lawsuit, I expect, then would define that depending on what the executive were to assert. But again, we have a very clear waiver here that we will be happy to defend against any comers who want to claim that the people's right to have access to public records should be blocked by some assertion of privilege.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jonathan. Up next, we've got Craig Mauger with the Detroit News.
Hey, thanks for taking my question. I'm curious, Lonnie, are you encouraging Democratic members of the legislature to oppose the LoRa package that is before them currently?
I won't just encourage Democratic members. I would encourage any members that value true transparency to take a look at those bills long and hard and what they actually provide for, because it isn't transparency and it isn't accountability. It is a lot of additional loopholes. And let me say this: we spoke in favor of the Laura bill package last year as a step in the right direction with much more to do. These bills this year, even though it's been reported that they are, functionally or fundamentally similar, are far worse. And we do not support the package as it stands and as has been introduced in the House.
You good there, Craig?
Yes, thank you.
Cool. All right. Next up, we've got Lindsay. And Lindsay, are you from Wood TV?
Hi, yes, good morning. This is Lindsay McComo from Wood TV. Thanks for taking my question. If you could, Lonnie, just expand a bit on why now. Obviously, we've seen these failed attempts in the legislature, unfortunately, for FOIA reform. What was really kind of that straw that broke the camel's back in then taking up this initiative?
Yeah, well, thanks for that question, Lindsay. I said it in the intro, but these bills really are like ordering transparency from wish.com. It's taken too long, and when they get here, they're not nothing like what you expected, right? And so we've been working on FOIA reform for 8 years. I mean, I've been at Progress Michigan. It'll be 8 years in August, and we've been doing this for a long time. And every year, it's like Lucy with the football. The legislature says, we're going to take up FOIA reform, or we're going to take up transparency. And then, it goes to die in the Senate. And we're done with that. People have been waiting for too long. It has nothing to do with who's in charge. These bills open the legislature and the governor's office. We've been fighting for these same principles when it was a Republican governor and now when it's a Democratic governor. It's just that this is good government. And fundamentally, our organization has supported real transparency and good government. And that's what these bills are. And frankly, it was just time. We're tired of waiting. We're tired of being told that it's coming, that they're doing it. We promise, we pinky promise that this will get done this year. It's far past time that Michigan do something about our transparency problem. I think we started by saying, we have the worst ethics and transparency rankings. That ranking came out, Sam, help me with the year, 5 years ago?
2015, 2016.
Yeah, so 5 or 6 years ago, and nothing has been done to address it. And so, just like other things, when the legislature refuses to address a real problem, the people have to step in and do it. And that's what Progress Michigan's doing here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Let's see here. Next up, we've got Lauren Gibbons with MLive.
Hey, thanks for taking the question and having the call. I have two quick questions. The first one is, at this point, does Progress Michigan have any partners on this, or are you building a coalition of any other groups that have supported FOIA reform in the past?
We've been reaching out to folks, Lauren. We assume that there will be plenty that sign on. Being very honest, we've been very deliberate about the process here of getting the language, and so it's really hard to ask folks to sign on before we've had language. And now that we have that and it's out there, we'll be working diligently to make sure that folks that are interested have that opportunity. But we did have conversations with folks around, including trying to get some input from folks in the media about the issues that you all have when seeking FOIA documents, and trying to make sure that this really is good for anyone who's interested in accountability and transparency. So we don't have anyone to announce right now, but we will be working on that moving forward now that we have the language.
And then my other question, I was wondering actually if you could walk through, I am kind of speed reading through the proposal here, and I was wondering if you could walk through the specific changes to the process itself. in terms of, how the fees would work and whether there were any additional mechanisms in place for those who are appealing FOIAs that are denied.
Sure. So let me talk a little bit about the major changes, and then maybe if you need more details, Mark can dive into some of those. But the major changes here are that it will apply the Freedom of Information Act as it stands for other local units of government to the governor's office and the state legislature. It doesn't create a new section. It requires those public records to be produced and delivered within 60 days of granting the FOIA request, so no more waiting up to a year or longer for those requests. It expands FOIA to include legislative caucus records, which is another large hole in the LAURA bills that are moving currently. And a big change here that I think we have to make sure that we highlight is that it requires a log be published every day detailing the names of all public visitors to the governors, lieutenant governors, and legislative offices on the previous day, along with records detailing the public events of the previous day. And it makes those logs and that requirement enforceable in court. So let me be the first to say, this is not the end all be all of FOIA reform. When you are doing something as a ballot measure, there are a lot of things that we have to account for. And one of those is the length of the proposal that has to be included. We did not feel that we could adequately address the fee structure in a way that made this possible through a ballot measure. So, that's one of those areas that if the legislature wants to pick up the mantle of transparency, we would encourage them to address the fees associated with FOIAs, because it is another large issue. But we felt like we had tackled a lot of really large issues and it couldn't get to everything that we would want to do.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Next up, we've got Dave Eggert, Associated Press.
Hey, Lonnie, thanks for doing the call. I had two questions. I was wondering if you could elaborate more on your concerns with the current legislation in the legislature, just what the issues are specifically. And then second, I noticed it looks like there's an exemption in there for non-public events on past schedules of the governor and lieutenant governor. And I was wondering what the justification was for that.
So that is both the governor and lieutenant governor and the legislature. We do apply it equally. But that, Dave, is where the log comes in for all of those public visits and all of that information. This is a new section that was added to adjust for that. There were some security concerns about calendars that may show recurring events like a staff meeting and where those locations are. And so we believed, and you all are free to to disagree with me and tell me that I'm wrong here. We believed that the log was actually better at getting to the information that we wanted to know about those who were visiting and meeting with the governor and lieutenant governor and legislature without revealing potential security issues in the non-public events that are on a calendar.
And then, sorry, are you able to kind of just elaborate on the problems with the current legislation in the House?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I jumped right into the last part of your question. Just totally ignored the first part. So yeah, I think there are many. The first is that the LAURA bills apply a much lower standard of disclosure to the legislature than any other branch of government, including the executive. They allow for the destruction of records within a 14-day window. If you read how those bills are worded, nothing is a public record for 14 days. And if you request a record that is exempt, there is a proactive destruction schedule, essentially, that allows them to delete or destroy any exempt records. There's also a large loophole that we believe with no access to caucus records. So I believe what that sets up is a system where you hide all the documents that you don't want public through the caucus system. I mean, I think there's a real question as to whether or not we would have been able to get access to the severance agreements for the legislature if they simply structured those as going through the caucus as opposed to the House Business Office or the Senate Business Office. And so there are a lot of additional loopholes in those bills that really make it so that I actually think it could possibly be worse, because then you have no recourse either to go to the court system. So the way that those bills are set up is if I appeal, the legislature says, I'm not giving you that record. If I appeal that, it has to go to then the Legislative Service Bureau, and it's a group of folks who are appointed by people in the legislature. So there's no actual outside review either. So it's a process that is completely made up to support those in the legislature, while still, there's a lot of exemptions in there as well that you won't find in our proposal for the governor's office, but it still exposes the governor's office to FOIA and creates an entirely new system for the legislature, full of exemptions and carve-outs and loopholes.
All right. You good, Dave?
Yeah, thank you.
Did I finally answer all of it? I'm sorry.
All right. It looks like 3 more questions here, and then I think we'll call it on the Q&A there. And if anyone does have follow-up questions, feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email. You can find my information at the top of the media advisory and the press release that's already gone out.
We definitely want to make sure everyone, if anyone else has a question, put your hand up now. I don't want to see any stories saying we skipped over you and didn't get to call on everybody. We're going to make sure we get to everyone in our press conference today.
Up next, we have Samantha, who I believe is with MERS. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes. Hello. Can everyone hear me? This is Sam with MERS News. My question is, and it's sort of 2 questions. First being, who and what's funding your pursuit right now? And on top of that, where are you gathering the manpower to collect valid signatures and to also raise awareness to everyday constituents on this matter?
Sure. So let me talk about the first part of your question first. The ballot proposal will go through the Coalition to Close Lansing Loopholes, which is the ballot committee operated by Progress Michigan. And all of the campaign finance stuff will be reported there. Currently, it's a Progress Michigan effort, so it won't surprise you, I'm sure, to see, when those first reports come out that we're the ones who have supported. We, as I said earlier, will be working to find other members who are interested in this and folks who support it to add to that. And again, that will all be reported through the ballot committee. The next part of your question was about signature gathering. We don't have a current timeline on signature gathering because we're waiting for the lawsuit that we filed. So in the meantime, we'll be working with any of those partners that join us in this effort to discuss what that might look like. We do expect that there will be both paid and volunteer signature gatherers as a part of these efforts, and we will be collecting signatures jointly for both the lobby reform proposal and FOIA reform. And then finally, about educating folks, I think this is an issue that people care about naturally. And so I don't think it's going to be a big lift to have to educate them about what this means. I think you say, should the governor's office and legislature be subject to the same transparency that every other unit of government is? And it's pretty much a no-brainer for people. But Progress Michigan, we do a lot of public relations work, and we'll continue to support the effort in that way to get the information out and to educate not only the public, but also our partners who are out talking to folks about the issues that are important to them every day.
All right. Thank you, Lonnie. Up next, John Hewitt with WWJ, if I'm not mistaken.
Hi, gentlemen. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, you're good.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Quick question in regard to signatures. Is there a certain amount you need and the time frame as to when they would be gathered and need to be submitted to get it on the ballot?
Yes, and I always screw this up, so I'm going to let Mark take this one.
Thanks, Lonnie. You know, this is a statutory initiative, not a constitutional amendment. So it requires approximately 342,000 valid signatures to be filed by late next spring. Traditionally, groups would gather a cushion above that number to make sure there's enough valid signatures. And of course, they have to be gathered within 180 days under a Michigan statute.
Granted, thank you. And again, forgive me for joining slightly in progress. We're looking to get this on the ballot this November, correct?
No, under Michigan law, only the legislature could put something on the ballot between general elections. So this petition and its colleague, the lobbying reform proposal, are intended to be on the 2022 general election ballot.
Thank you for the clarification. My last question is for anyone who would want it, and I'm looking for a little bit more of a historical perspective. And what I'm asking is, how did Michigan get in this shape anyway in regard to lawmakers, the governor, being under less scrutiny? I've heard people talk in the past, if I'm not mistaken, that it was maybe aimed at avoiding over litigious lawsuits and that kind of thing. And I don't know if you subscribe to that, or I'd be interested in your recap in regard to how we got to this position. Not that you, defended where the laws went and the limits went, but, the arguments for and how it's maybe overcompensated and the pendulum swung too far, if you get what I'm asking.
Lonnie, if I may?
Yeah, absolutely.
And this was probably before all of our times. I mean, the Freedom of Information Act dates to the mid-'70s. It was part of a wave of reform legislation in Michigan and nationally. And these exemptions for the governor and the legislature date to that time. They've been there since 1976, unfortunately. And that's what now Progress Michigan is trying to, at last, remedy.
And not to monopolize, my final question is, why do you think no legislative body, Democrat or Republican, has even bothered to seriously take this issue on? I mean, why were they, I think I may know, but why were they happy with the status quo, in your opinion?
Do you want me to jump in on this one, Mark, or would you like
Sure,
to?
Lonnie, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, look, it is a complicated issue. But I honestly believe it's just, it's become convenient. A lot of these folks come from local government, and so they understand the importance. But it's a way of doing business that truly illuminates the actions of the folks that are in office. And I just don't think there's been willpower to be able to make real reform. I mean, look, what they're doing in the legislature right now, if they pass those bills, it looks great on campaign lit to say, look, we really fought for transparency. But that seems to be what has been most important for them is being able to talk about it without really doing it. And so I can't speak to, to why specifically they would continue to not really pass real reform. But I can tell you why they like to talk about it. I just believe that it's a comfort and convenience thing. And we just have to change that. That's why it's going to take an outside group. We have to change that culture. That's the same forethought that we came to the lobby reform proposal with, is like, they're never going to do this on their own because they're too personally invested in that process. And so we believe that it was going to take an outside effort and an outside push to get anything meaningful done.
Thanks for the opportunity.
All right, and I think Jonathan, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, sorry, Lonnie, you mentioned that you think these bills are actually quite a bit worse than the version approved last year by the House. They look pretty similar to me. What's worse about them to you?
Well, I believe that the new destruction of public records language is new. the 14-day window where, you know, that they could, actually, it's like the positive destruction piece, where they proactively say that you can destroy exempt records. That is new. I believe there are a few exemptions that were either taken out during committee, or were changed around. Mark, I feel like I'm missing one of the other things that we talked about as one of the big issues with Laura.
Yeah, I may be mistaken on this, Lonnie, but I don't recall last year's package there being an appeal fee. It may seem like a small thing because the appeal process is ridiculous, as Lonnie described, but there's also a fee associated with that that I think is new to this package.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Last call for any raised hands. All right. Well, like I said, as you know, feel free to shoot me an email if anyone has any follow-up questions. sam@progressmichigan.org. A recording of this press conference will be made available. Just give me a little bit of time while that video renders. And appreciate folks hopping on. And we'll talk soon. And have a great Sunshine Week.